Joanne. This is the Turtle Stack, where I talk with guests about topics they love even though I don't know much about it. We use 2 guidelines, no slamming, no selling. So we do our best to keep focused on the positive instead of tearing something down and without pushing agendas. We just want to focus on having an open mind to something new and building up the things we enjoy. Let's get into it. Today I am here with Chelsea. What are we going to be talking about today, Chelsea?
The Harry Potter universe.
Fantastic. So most people know what Harry Potter is at this point, but yeah, if you can give just a brief summary of kind of what that universe is.
Sure. So the books follow this kid named Harry Potter. We start out with him at 11 years old. So by the end of book 7, he's 17 years old. Each book is 1 year of schooling for him. He goes to a magical school called Hogwarts where they learn how to perform magic. The main plot point is this evil overlord dude who has essentially been gone for a very long time, popping back up to wreak havoc and try to take over the wizarding world and abolish certain race equivalent of wizards and witches. And Harry has to basically defeat him, I guess is the easiest way to say it.
Okay.
And that's the easiest way you can explain it without giving spoilers.
Okay. And personally, I think from this point on, spoilers are on the table.
Right.
Okay. Is there a specific reason you think this universe captured the hearts of so many people, or why it drew you in?
I think one of the main reasons Harry Potter became so popular is because a lot of the readers can grow up with the main character. 11 years old is around when you start reading serious chapter books. It starts out fairly kid-friendly, and as you go forward and you get older with the main character, you start to see more real-world themes, things that we deal with in our world, but it's still a fantasy world where the problems they deal with are parallel to ours, but still different enough that we can disconnect from our reality to fully immerse ourselves in a different one.
That's a really big accomplishment. Yeah, making something relatable without it being a blatant in-your-face statement.
Right.
Okay. Was there something specific that you want to focus on or start with in talking about the universe?
Honestly, my favorite thing about Harry Potter overall, as I've gotten older, is just this appreciation for how deep the lore goes. To me, as someone who's reread the series a bunch of times and has fully immersed myself into behind the scenes fandom lore, really digging deep into the background of writing it definitely seems like she was not planning for things to go as far as they did. There are certain inconsistencies that you can see, but that's true of any author. But I do deeply appreciate how intense and well formed the world is. We can go back all the way to the 1900s, 1800s. She has lore for everything. We have the backstory of Hogwarts, we have the backstory of the founders of Hogwarts, but we also had expanded into America, which kind of brings us into Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which is sort of separate. It's in the same universe, but it's further back in time and in America.
Did she create an entirely different world, or did she kind of recreate actual history as well?
So once we get into Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them and all the world building she did for America, we do see a dovetail with history.
Okay.
I think in the beginning, it's easier to say it does take place in our world. The wizarding world is meant to be side by side with the quote-unquote Muggle world.
Well, very cool. So basically it is like our world, but at a certain point in history, it branched off to fit the story she was trying to tell.
Yes.
Okay. Is there something specific that she's put in her universe that you feel is really unique to hers?
As a kid, what drew me to it was just it's a fantastic world. I'm growing up with this character. This is so fun and exciting. And then it's progressing in themes with an appropriate age group, so to speak. Now when I look at the universe of Harry Potter, the things that stand out to me are how many layers there are. Certain things that come with that. There are certain themes like racism that are real concepts for us, but are looked at in a different way. There are different types of wizards and witches and people. We have the Muggles, which are non-magic users. We have purebloods, which are people who come from a long line of wizards who have never had contact with Muggles in terms of marriage or reproduction. And then you have the half-bloods, which are a mixture of the two. And one of the things that consistently pops up is purebloods versus muggleborns, which they refer to as mudbloods, and it's considered a slur. And that's actually where the main antagonist comes in with his message was to get rid of the mudbloods. In addition to that, we also have magical creatures. There's a lot of prejudice against magical creatures. There's different classes of them, like the sentient ones versus the non-sentient ones. A great example of that would be the centaurs, who one of the characters in a later book is she's super against magical creatures being classed as people or as sentient beings. If you're a vampire, you're not a person. If you're a werewolf, you're not a person. If you're a centaur, you're not a person. You're an animal. There was also mention of the werewolves were meant to dovetail with AIDS because it was considered a disease in the wizarding world. People who had it could not have jobs. They couldn't have a living. They were considered outcasts of society, and it was meant to mimic the AIDS epidemic and homophobia. And I think those things are just really interesting to be able to write in such adult themes into a book that was originally for kids, because these are things that we deal with as we grow up more and more.
It gives a frame for kids to think about something and not necessarily realize that they're being taught these values.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of that was intentional on J.K. Rowling's part?
I think it's a bit of a mix, honestly. This was where we really get into controversy about J.K. Rowling as a person.
Yeah.
I will say that I don't think there was any intent of offense anywhere, but I do think it was more likely accidental and then was taken and run with.
That makes sense. What other things are there in the universe that are just like cool or interesting or particularly fun to learn about?
Yeah, on a more lighthearted note for sure, there are several magical wizarding schools in the world. The one we learn about most in the Harry Potter series is Hogwarts, which is in Scotland. There are 3 others that are mentioned throughout the series, one being in France and one in Bulgaria. I think it was Bulgaria. But then the other one is in America, and it's called Ilvermorny. If you go on the Pottermore website, you can read the entire backstory for how Ilvermorny was founded. And the basic of it is there was this witch who had this child that she was in charge of who wanted to learn magic, and the older witch would not let her go to Hogwarts, and there was a whole thing with that, so she ran away to America, and she founded Ilvermorny using her own children and her muggle husband, and I just find that really interesting. On another note, you can also find all kinds of information about wand lore or magical creatures. You can take a bunch of quizzes to find out what your house is, what your wand would be, and what your Patronus would be. And I really like it because it's not just if you were faced with a dragon, would you stab it or would you hide behind a friend to decide if you're a Ravenclaw or a Hufflepuff. To clarify, I am a Hufflepuff. So I'm not saying Hufflepuffs are cowards because that's absolutely not true. What they actually do is it's a bunch of somewhat vague questions. Most of them are like, you're presented with 3 paths. You can go to the castle, the ocean, or you can go through the forest. Which one do you choose? It's really interesting and I enjoy it a lot. You can look at these things and find out more about your house and what it says about you as a person. I find the houses interesting too. This is a slight side note. The houses are really interesting because in the books, they're kind of presented as like, these are your core character traits. But I think in an ideal, if the wizarding world was real, the houses would be more of a representation of your personal values. And I think that just opens a whole world for ways to relate to other people, starting real conversations about like, what do I value the most? What kind of person am I? Stuff like that.
Yeah, it seems interesting that the quizzes don't have obvious good or evil or like, I want to be in this house, so I'm going to give these answers because I know it's going to give the results that I want.
Right. I will also say that that's one of my favorite things about the Pottermore website and then all the articles you can find. It's also interesting because they don't present the same questions to every single person in the same order. There are people who have spent years crowdsourcing other people's answers to find out which ones you have to select to get which house or wand or Patronus. It's absolutely insane to see how invested people can become in just one series.
So then, real quick, because we did spend a little bit of time talking about it, what are houses, Chelsea?
All right, that's a great question. The Hogwarts houses are Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Slytherin. If you want to get into what they are in the books, Gryffindor is the house of the brave. Ravenclaw is the house of the smart or knowledgeable. Slytherin is the house of the cunning. And then Hufflepuff is kind of forgotten, which kind of sucks. The further down the line you get and the deeper into the world you get, it's more of a matter of like Hufflepuff is for loyalty. In the books, Gryffindor is the good, Slytherin is the bad, Ravenclaw is the smarty pant nerds, and Hufflepuff is just the soft boys and girls. And just, I will say that she did rectify that eventually and gave a lot more depth and meaning to these things. And that's also what I find interesting about Harry Potter, is how it started so surface level and then it just ran.
I mean, that's part of just growing as a writer as well. Like, it's really easy to just make those categories, and then once you're like, okay, I have to write multiple books on these, you start learning more about them yourself as you're writing. You also mentioned Patronus and wands.
Yeah, I can definitely go into that. I'll start with the Patronuses. So a Patronus is the corporeal form of your happiest memory. It's meant to chase off a creature called a Dementor, which its sole purpose in life is to suck all of the happiness out of people, and if it gets close enough to like touch you, it sucks your soul out of your body. Great stuff. So the Patronus is meant to ward that off, and it's formed by thinking of your happiest memory and shouting the spell, which is Expecto Patronum. And it usually is supposed to take a very long time, a lot of self-reflection, this, that, and the other thing to produce it. It takes the shape of an animal. There's only one per person. The headmaster has a phoenix, Hermione Granger has an otter, Ron Weasley has a terrier, and Harry Potter has a stag. We can get really deep into how interesting these things are too. So Hermione and Ron, another spoiler, they do get together, they get married, they fall in love, whatever. It's really cute, honestly. The terrier that Ron has is known to chase otters, and so she has an otter Patronus and he has that terrier.
Aw, that's really cute.
I love it so much. So Harry's dad was what is called an animagus, someone who can transform into an animal, and his animagus form was a stag. So Harry's mom's Patronus was a doe, and Severus Snape, one of the professors who most people have heard about, his Patronus was also a doe, and that goes into their backstory of Severus Snape being absolutely obsessed and infatuated with Lily, Harry's mom. So then when we look at Ron and Hermione, who have a healthy, equal romantic relationship, they have two animals that go together, whereas Severus Snape's is an exact copy of this other woman, which is not okay. And I just think it's a really interesting concept because, again, it has to be your absolute happiest memory. It can't just be, oh, I got ice cream today. It has to be something deep and meaningful.
Well, first of all, I think you are downgrading the value of a good ice cream.
Probably a little bit.
Second of all, because my brain does the thing where it pokes holes in everything immediately.
Mm-hmm.
These are 17-year-old kids that we're talking about at the end of the series.
Yes.
It's hard to believe that your happiest memory doesn't change at a certain point.
Right.
Wouldn't it change the shape of your Patronus?
Yes, and we do actually have an example of that with a character called Fedora Tonks. Oh. She falls in love with a werewolf, one of the other main characters. And accordingly, her Patronus changes to a wolf, just like Lily Evans and James Potter.
Oh.
It's very interesting to consider these things, and I think the main point of a animagus changing is something very big has to change within yourself, because the Patronus is not a reflection necessarily of the memory so much as it is as the things you value or who you are.
Yeah, I really appreciate that example is in there, because there's so much media out there for young adults and it is important and valuable, but high school is such a small percentage of your life. There is so much left after that.
I do believe that within the series it is meant to be the happiest moment up until whatever point you're casting the spell.
Oh, okay.
There is also to consider there are certain people who can't produce a Patronus and are generally considered to be evil. I think there was a thing about that with Voldemort and his followers. I just think it's very interesting, and Pottermore does have a quiz with. That's the other thing about the Pottermore quizzes is there's a massive amount of potential answers that you get, and the pathways to get those answers are fairly complex. I have no idea who created it for sure, but whoever it was should get a raise.
Did you do the test? Do you know what your Patronus is off the top of your head?
I did. I am a fire-dwelling salamander, which it's an incredibly rare Patronus. Oh my god, I'm so special. And I can actually pull up the information on what that means. You can find information on what it means when you get a specific Patronus or wand. It means you find comfort in rebirth. You wholeheartedly embrace the idea that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and if you get knocked down, everyone knows you'll get right back up again.
I like that. Like, it's a positive one, definitely.
They mostly focus on positivity because it is something produced by a positive emotion.
Right, that makes sense. It's very akin to like horoscopes and such, but the nice thing about this is it's a reflection of the questions you answered and like you actually put something into it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's one of the things I appreciate about the quizzes so much. Now, we mentioned wands, and I find the wands so fascinating, okay? Like, I could go crazy about this. So, the story behind the wands is there are three elements to them: the wood, the core, and the length, or the flexibility, I'm sorry, not the length.
Okay.
Those are the three defining pieces of the wands. When Harry gets his wand, he goes into a store called Ollivanders. It's like a legacy family store. So the way that we're introduced to them is through Ollivanders. And Ollivanders, the family, were very picky about what things they used, which types of wood, which cores, all of that. And the wand chooses the wizard. So when they make the wands, they just put together combinations that feel right, and then the wand waits to be picked.
Okay.
The cores are always something magical. So as long as the core came from something magical, it will work. But some are more useful than others. And then you can get into the wood too. So there are certain trees that can be used for their wood for wand making. The wood and the core combinations produce different levels of magic. So some of them work best with a wizard who is brave and determined, and some of them work better with people who would rather heal than fight. And then some of them are like quite bendy, quite flexible. You have the brittle ones, the ones that are hard and unyielding, and that's supposed to say a bit about your personality too. And I just think it's so interesting.
So if somebody was interested in taking the quizzes, where should they go?
Wizardingworld.com, but if you Google Pottermore, it will bring you there.
Okay. It's a really fun experience for people. Like, it's one thing to read things on a page, but when you kind of let yourself believe in that world for a little bit, like that suspension of disbelief is really powerful and good.
Yeah, I think that's also why it got so popular. Is it's a completely separate world, but at the same time, it's not.
It just bridges that gap of believability or plausibility where you're like, but you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's how a lot of these types of books become successful.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I will say that one of the reasons Harry Potter was so important to me is because I could relate to him. And looking back now, I always find new things that I can relate to in this world. It helps me find a sense of self in a weird way.
That makes a lot of sense to me. It gives you a grounding point for learning about who you are and who you want to be.
Yes. It's just such a deep universe series, whatever, that it's really easy to find realistic connections like that. When I was in like middle school, I had a friend. I'm not gonna say her name or anything, but this was one of the things we really bonded on. Was Harry Potter from the perspective I remember it from. Her mom knitted us Harry Potter scarves. This was just one of our things.
Yeah.
And Harry Potter is just such. It just connects people so easily in a way. And so that was one of the most meaningful friendships in my life that I can think of. Even though I don't talk to her anymore, I still remember that.
Sometimes it takes just one thing that you have in common to make you talk to somebody and make you realize how much more you have in common. So Harry Potter, I think, has been that for a lot of people, and it's awesome that it was for you and your friends.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
You are more than welcome. I really enjoyed this. Like, it's neat because I keep being told that I need to read the books, and I do need to read the books. I agree. But it's easier to get excited about something when you're hearing it from somebody who's already excited about it, and it's in a format of like, this is why, as opposed to just read them because they're popular.
Right. I highly recommend them, but I'm sure you already figured that out.
I did. Is there any like final thoughts or anything that you want to share, or are we good?
Just read Harry Potter. Watch the movies. Just find some way to connect to them. Most people don't regret it.
Well, if anybody's interested in finding you or reaching out to you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
My Instagram account is pomegranate.flowers. It should pop up. It's mostly just art. It's where I put all my art. It's where I talk to my long distance friends and just talk about the weird things that I'm obsessed with, like mythology and Harry Potter.
Okay, so yeah, then anybody who's interested in talking about mythology or Harry Potter with Chelsea, now you know where.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're interested in following me, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as The Turtle Stack. If you have something you want to chat about, please email theturtlestack@gmail.com. I don't need an expert, just someone who enjoys something, no matter how simple or eccentric. If you're excited to talk about it, I'm excited to listen. Just remember the rules. No slamming, no selling. Thanks for listening.